My knees buckled somewhere between the fourth and fifth hour. The only thing I had eaten all day was a dry cracker I found behind a rusted can of peaches. My vision blurred, my body trembled, and still no one came. I remember pressing my ear to the door, begging. Whispering first, then shouting, then just breathing, just existing, because that's all I was allowed to do. Exist. In the dark. In the silence. In the stench of old onions and spilled vinegar. I wasn't always like this. I wasn't always this. Fragile things scratching at pantry walls. But if you must know where it started with her. My daughter-in-law, Esme. Blonde, sharp-tongued, and colder than the tiles she made me scrub on my knees. I moved in with my son Grant after my hip surgery, expecting care, warmth, family. What I got instead was servitude. And eventually, punishment. The first time she locked me in, she smiled while doing it. "You think you can talk back to me, old woman?" "Think again," she said, as if I were a stray cat scratching up her floors. The pantry door slammed shut. It clicked. And that's when the silence started growing teeth. At first, I thought it was a joke. But when an hour passed, then 2, then 5, and I had to relieve myself in a plastic container, I realized this wasn't a game. This was war. Only I didn't know I had become the prisoner. Not until I started losing weight without dieting, shaking from hunger, begging for water that came late and warm. Sometimes she'd unlock the door, let me crawl out, only to shove me back in when I didn't thank her enough. And Grant? My son? He was either at work or completely blind. Perhaps both. But one night, I heard her, outside the pantry, whispering on the phone. "If she dies in there, I'll just say I forgot," she said with a laugh. That laugh made my blood freeze. She wanted me gone. Quietly. Slowly. Without a mess. So I made a decision. If she wanted me dead, fine. I'd die. But on my terms. I began preparing. Saving bits of crackers she forgot I had. Scratching behind cans for anything edible. Hiding my weakness. And one day, when she thought she had finally broken me, I collapsed, deliberately, with my mouth foaming from crushed painkillers I pretended to swallow. She panicked. Called Grant. Called an ambulance. But by the time they arrived, I was gone. At least, they thought I was. The truth? I escaped. And now? Now I'm watching her from afar. Waiting. Building my army. When I return, I won't be just an old woman locked in a pantry. I'll be the storm that tears her perfect little house down. Before you scroll away, I need to ask, where are you listening from? Have you or your mother ever been treated like they were invisible in their own family? If this story moves something in you, please like, comment, and subscribe. Your support tells the world that elder abuse isn't invisible. It's real. And it will be exposed. I laid there in that coffin like I was born for it. Still. Silent. Swaddled in death's makeup. The morgue technician owed a favor to a friend of mine from church, a woman who had buried 3 husbands and knew how to hide a body without digging soil. She didn't ask questions. Just nodded when I whispered, "Let them think I'm gone." The obituary ran a day later. Diana Whitmore, 72, passed quietly in her sleep. There was no funeral, of course. Esme said it was too painful. But I knew the truth. She didn't want Grant poking around my belongings. Especially not the will. Especially not the letter I had left behind. In it, I thanked them for caring for me. I told them not to feel guilty. I forgave them. I even blessed Esme, calling her the daughter I never had. That letter wasn't for closure. It was bait. Because while they celebrated their freedom, dining out, throwing my things into black trash bags, I was alive, hidden in a church basement 2 towns away, eating hot soup and planning every step of their downfall. My old friend, Miriam, the one with the graveyard sense of humor and widow's wisdom, gave me a safe place to rest, heal, and think. "You ain't done yet," she'd whisper, pushing a cup of broth into my hand. "You didn't crawl out of that pantry to die in my guest room." She was right. So I made a list. It had 3 names. 1, Esme Whitmore, for the bruises on my back and the silence on my tongue. 2, Grant Whitmore, for never noticing. For choosing her convenience over my dignity. 3, Justice, Because somewhere in that town, a judge still remembered my name. And there was more. I began documenting every memory, every locked door hour, every glass of water denied, every whisper, scream, and slap. Miriam helped me record audio messages, my own testimony, and saved it to a USB drive shaped like a crucifix. Hidden in plain sight. But I wanted more than revenge. I wanted exposure. Esme always cared about appearances. Her social media glowed with perfect family dinners, wellness quotes, charity events. What would her followers think if they saw the truth? The pantry. The bruises. The woman she left to rot while sipping kale smoothies? It was time to collect evidence. The next step? Get back into that house. Not as Diana Whitmore. No, that woman was dead. But as someone else. A cleaning lady. A silent visitor. Or maybe a ghost. They thought I had disappeared into death. They had no idea I was walking straight into their lives again, with a camera in my pocket, a microphone under my scarf, and a storm in my soul. The mirror didn't lie, it didn't flatter either. The woman staring back at me had shorter gray hair now, dyed with streaks of fading black. No glasses. A slight hunch I'd perfected after days of watching elderly maids at the train station. I even borrowed one's old apron and matched the accent of a housekeeper from the next state over. I had erased Diana Whitmore. Now, I was Margaret Bell, part-time cleaner, soft-spoken and invisible, just the way Esme liked her help. Miriam had done the hard part. A few calls to a friend who ran a local housekeeping agency, and suddenly Margaret was on a trial run to clean Esme Whitmore's home. Apparently, their last housekeeper had quit. Something about cruelty and verbal abuse. Typical Esme. I stepped into that house on a Friday morning with a mop in my hand and a camera in my bag. And the first thing I noticed? They had turned my room into a yoga studio. My nightstand was gone. My rocking chair? Dumped. The photographs of my late husband, my parents, even my wedding ring, all missing. In their place, lemon-scented candles, folded mats, and a poster that read, "Cleanse the body, free the mind." I nearly laughed. Esme didn't even glance twice at me. Kitchen, then guest bath. Stay out of the pantry. That's private, she snapped, shoving a pair of gloves at me without eye contact. Oh, the irony. I nodded, whispering, "Yes, ma'am," and headed straight for the kitchen. The pantry door, that cursed door, was still the same. Same chipped paint. Same creaky hinge. Same hollow echo when I tapped it. I wanted to scream. To rip it open. To show her the marks on my back, scars of where I had leaned against shelves, waiting for release that never came. But not yet. I pulled out my phone hidden in a zippered pouch sewn into my apron and slid a tiny magnetic camera behind a row of spice jars. Then another under the sink. One more by the hallway. I moved like I was dusting, cleaning, but every motion was strategic. Every step calculated. The whole house, every room she once locked me out of, I now claimed, one by one. And then, I found it. Tucked in a drawer near the fridge, my will. The original. Unshredded. Unsigned. Unchanged. She never filed it. She never told Grant. She planned to let me die without a trace, with no legal trail, no estate, no voice. I slipped it into my bra and kept mopping like nothing happened. Esme passed me in the hallway once, phone in hand, laughing to someone. The old hag left everything to Grant, imagine? I should have just let her rot longer. That's when I knew the cameras wouldn't just record her cruelty. They'd record her confession. I worked for 3 hours, quietly gathering digital weapons. Before leaving, I stood by the pantry one last time, wiped a smudge off the door, and whispered through clenched teeth, "I'm not locked in anymore." Because the next time I return, it won't be with a mop. It'll be with a judge, a journalist, and a vengeance too big to fit in that pantry. The camera footage wasn't perfect, but it didn't need to be. In the dim, lemony light of Esme's flawless kitchen, her voice rang clear. She's dead now. Who cares if I locked her in a pantry? I didn't kill her, not directly. I paused the video and sat back, the glow of Miriam's laptop warming my lap like a campfire before war. My hands trembled slightly, not with fear, but with the weight of knowing. This was the match. And Esme? She'd built her house with gasoline. The voice recording, paired with that single line from her phone call, was enough to burn the first layer of her carefully crafted image. But I didn't want it to go viral immediately, no. I wanted it to simmer. Boil. I wanted her to feel the heat before the fire. So I posted it anonymously to a local Facebook group, Suburban Shadows, a digital gossip corner where neighborhood women gossiped under screen names like Wine Mom 23 and Retired But Petty. The post read, "Do you know this voice? This woman brags about locking her elderly mother-in-law in a pantry until she died. This isn't fiction. This is happening behind manicured doors." Within minutes, comments started rolling in. OMG, this sounds like Esme Whitmore? Wait, the yoga girl with the white kitchen. If this is who I think it is, wow. Call the police. This is elder abuse. The beauty of social media isn't the truth, it's doubt. And doubt spreads like mold in silence. Esme didn't even know what was coming. She was probably applying a face mask or sipping oat milk while her neighbors passed judgment behind their screens. Miriam chuckled behind me. She wanted silence. You're giving her a megaphone. I smiled. This is just Act 1. But I wasn't done. I sent the video to 3 reporters, 1 local, 1 state, and 1 national, under the name Pantry Witness. Then I mailed a physical copy of the footage, along with printed screenshots of my will, to the Whitmore family lawyer. Let them wonder, who's doing this? Who knows so much? That night, as I lay in Miriam's spare bed, wrapped in a crocheted blanket older than Esme's last marriage, I imagined her waking up to buzzing phones, pinging alerts, whispering neighbors. She'd check her socials, see her own words staring back. She'd scream, cry, deny, and Grant? He'd start wondering what else she never told him. But this was only the beginning. There were more recordings, more cameras, more buried truths ready to rise. You see, the pantry may have been small, but what grew in that darkness was not weak. It was dangerous. Esme hadn't left the house in 2 days. Miriam and I watched from across the street, parked inside an old brown Honda Civic we borrowed from her neighbor, and counted how many curtains moved in a single afternoon. 3 shifts in the kitchen window, 2 glances from the upstairs blinds, 1 trembling silhouette pacing with a phone glued to her ear. She was unraveling. And the unraveling was beautiful. Across town, Grant was pacing for an entirely different reason. According to a friend at the county legal office, another quiet ally from my days on the library board, he had personally walked into Whitmore and Stein Law to confirm the letter I sent. The will was real. It was dated. It was notarized. And it left everything, including the house, to him. Not Esme. Not Mr. and Mrs. Whitmore. Just Grant. That morning, he confronted her. "You told me she didn't have a will," he said, standing in the very kitchen where I once collapsed from starvation. "You said the lawyers couldn't find one." Esme had no answer. I know because I had another recording, this one from a camera planted near the hallway thermostat. She stammered, then shouted, "What does it matter? She's dead. I took care of her. I cleaned up after her every day while you were off at work pretending nothing was wrong." He replied with a whisper that cut sharper than a scream, "I'm starting to think you're the one who killed her." Oh, how the tables trembled. That night, I uploaded a second clip. Not of her voice this time, but of mine. A recorded message. Black screen. Just my words. Just my pain. I'm Diana Whitmore. If you're watching this, you've probably seen what they did to me. You've heard the voice of the woman who locked me in a pantry for hours at a time. You've heard her laugh while planning my death. But what you don't know is that I'm not dead. Not yet. I was silent. I was invisible. But now, I'm coming home. The video went viral in under an hour. Over 70,000 shares. Hashtags like #PantryJustice and #Diana Whitmore Survivor started trending. Esme's Instagram disappeared that night. Her yoga brand's website went dark. Sponsors backed out. A local reporter camped outside her gate. And me? I stood behind the fence, in a black hood and sunglasses, watching it all, while she peeked through the blinds, shaking, whispering to herself like she'd seen a ghost. Only I wasn't a ghost. I was justice wearing lipstick and bruises turned to armor. Next, I was going back inside, not through the service entrance, not in disguise, but through the front door. With papers. With people. With press. Because I wasn't just reclaiming my house. I was reclaiming my name. The news vans arrived before I did. 3 of them, lined up outside the Whitmore estate like vultures in business suits. Microphones polished. Cameras rolling. Neighbors standing behind hedges with cell phones held high. It was a scene Esme could have only imagined in her worst, sweat-soaked nightmares. She thought I was dead. She thought the pantry had swallowed me whole and spit out nothing but silence. But today, in a navy blue coat, silver hair brushed neatly, with a cane in my left hand and a lawyer on my right, I walked up the same stone path where she once shoved me out barefoot in winter. The same path she thought I'd never return on. I pressed the doorbell. The chime echoed, sweet and surreal. Inside, I heard scrambling. Footsteps. A shriek. Then silence. Then the door creaked open. And there she stood. Esme. Mascara smudged. Hair in chaos. The face of a woman who had built her world on lies, now realizing the foundation was cracking. Her lips parted, but no words came. Her eyes locked on mine like she was staring into the grave she thought she'd filled. Behind her, Grant appeared. Pale. Confused. Holding his phone like a shield. "Mom," he whispered. "Is it really you?" I stepped forward slowly. "Alive and legally entitled," I said. Then turned to the press. "This is the home where I was starved, silenced, and left to die. And today, I've come not just to reclaim my property, but to remind every woman locked in a room somewhere that silence is not the end of their story." My lawyer handed Grant a folder. Inside it, the will. The videos. The signed medical report proving I'd faked my death with the help of a retired nurse. Every page, every signature airtight. Esme tried to slam the door, but the cameras were already flashing. The reporters already shouting questions. "Did you starve your mother-in-law? Did you lock her in the pantry? Esme, do you deny the audio recordings?" And then, she made the mistake that sealed her fate. She slapped the mic out of a reporter's hand and screamed. She should have died in there. She was a parasite. I did what anyone would have done. The gasp from the crowd was audible. The moment immortalized on live stream. Grant's hands fell to his sides. He didn't need more proof. His wife had just confessed on camera, with rage, with venom, with no remorse. He looked at me, then at her, and said only 2 words, "Get out." Esme stepped back, her chest heaving, eyes darting. You're choosing her over me? After everything." And for once, Grant stood tall. "You lied. You almost killed my mother. I don't know who you are anymore, but I know who she is. She's the one who gave me life. You tried to take hers." Behind me, my lawyer whispered, "We can file the restraining order this afternoon." I smiled softly. No rush. Let her sit in this moment. Let her feel what isolation really is. Esme ran upstairs. Reporters chased her car when it sped out of the driveway 10 minutes later. She didn't get far. Not with the footage circulating, the legal team filing, and the court order coming. And me? I stepped back into my house. The scent was different. The furniture unfamiliar. But the floors still creaked in the same spot by the window. The sunlight still touched the pantry door just so. I walked toward it. Opened it slowly. Stood in the space where I once wept, starved, waited. And whispered, "Look at me now." Esme didn't disappear. No, she did what women like her always do when exposed. She rebranded. By Monday, her yoga blog had returned, but now it was filled with tearful apologies and heavily edited videos where she blamed miscommunication and family misunderstandings. She posed in white linen near candlelight with captions like, "Healing from generational trauma begins with forgiveness, and when stories are one-sided, wounds stay open." Grant sent me the link with a single message, "You were right." She's already spinning it. But I had already anticipated this. I wasn't done hurting her. Not yet. See, when I lived in that house, before the pantry, before the silence I used to clean. Not just floors or shelves. I cleaned drawers, bookshelves, her closet, her office. And one day, years ago, I found something. A USB stick. Labeled with a single word, Esme. At the time, I thought nothing of it. But out of curiosity, I copied the contents to my own computer. I hadn't looked at them since. But now? Now I opened the folder, and what I saw would bury her far deeper than any pantry ever could. Bank transfers, tax evasion, fraudulent charity receipts, personal messages between her and a man named Holt, who was not Grant, discussing staged photos, fabricated donations, and how to keep the old lady quiet. Esme wasn't just abusive. She was criminal. She had built her yoga empire off of forged charity events and manipulated grieving women into buying her overpriced healing packages with false testimonials. And I had the receipts. All of them. I contacted a journalist from the state media office who had already been covering my case. Her name was Natalie, sharp, young, and hungry for the kind of story that makes careers. I handed her everything. USB, email chains, the charity license that expired years ago but was still plastered on Esme's website. Natalie's article dropped Wednesday morning. Headline, From Wellness to Wicked, the dark truth behind Esme Whitmore's yoga empire, it exploded. National outlets picked it up. Comment sections filled with betrayal, disbelief, and disgust. Women who once followed Esme's classes started posting videos of their own, calling her a liar, a manipulator, even a cult-like fraud. Sponsors pulled out. The police opened an investigation. And the final blow? The IRS came knocking. Grant called me that night. She's gone. Packed her things. Took off in her old car. No idea where she's going. I didn't reply at first. Just stared out the window of my home, feeling the breath of freedom fill my lungs. She ran from the cameras, I finally said. But she won't outrun the truth. He was quiet, then asked something I hadn't expected. Why didn't you tell me sooner, Mom? My voice cut. Because I wanted to believe you'd see it yourself. But love makes fools out of the best men. He sighed. I'm sorry. I know. And then, for the first time in years, we sat together at the dinner table, him with guilt in his eyes, me with scars on my soul, and ate a meal that wasn't filled with silence or shame. But peace. Real, earned peace. It began with an envelope. Cream-colored. No return address. Slid under my front door like a coward's whisper. Inside, a lawsuit. Esme Whitmore versus Diana Whitmore. Charges: defamation, harassment, emotional distress. Damages sought: $250,000. I stared at the paper for a full minute, blinking like the words might rearrange themselves into something sane. But no, she was serious. She had disappeared for days, maybe hiding in some rented room with blackout curtains and a bruised ego, and now she was suing me. Miriam howled when she read it. She tried to kill you, starve you, humiliate you, and now she's the victim? Please. But I wasn't laughing. Because this wasn't just petty revenge. It was strategy. She was trying to rewrite the narrative. Paint me as the bitter old woman who faked her death to ruin a young entrepreneur's life. She wanted to turn the press against me. Frame me as mentally unstable. But what she didn't know was that I had already prepared for this years ago. Back when Grant first married her, when I saw the way she looked at me like clutter, like an obstacle, I began recording. Journaling. Backing up emails. Not because I expected this level of cruelty, but because I knew she was dangerous. I just didn't know how yet. So when my lawyer, Denise, saw the lawsuit, she smiled. She's walking straight into your archive. That archive included dates and timestamps of every pantry lock-in. Photos of bruises I documented secretly. Doctor visits with complaints of lightheadedness and infrequent meals. A copy of a voicemail where she muttered, "One day I'll forget to unlock the pantry and no one will notice." But the piece de resistance? A notarized affidavit from her previous housekeeper, who had left abruptly years ago and finally agreed to testify after seeing Esme exposed on the news. She yelled at the old woman like she was a dog, the affidavit read. Threatened to withhold food. Said, and I quote, "She won't live long anyway, just have to outlast her." With this mountain of evidence, Denise drafted our response. It wasn't just a defense. It was a counter-lawsuit for attempted murder, elder abuse, defamation, and obstruction of justice. And unlike her claims, ours came with proof. When Esme received the countersuit, she lost her mind. I know because Natalie, the reporter, got footage of her storming out of the courthouse screaming, "She's trying to destroy me." No, Esme. You destroyed yourself. You used my silence as a weapon. You thought old age meant weakness. But you forgot. Women like me survive wars. We bury husbands, raise sons, carry generations. You thought you were fighting an old woman in a pantry. You were fighting a mother with nothing left to lose. And now you're the one trapped in a legal cage with no keys, no exit, and no audience left to fool. It started with a knock. Not frantic. Not loud. Just 3 soft, deliberate taps. I opened the door slowly, already sensing who it might be. Grant stood there alone, his hands in his pockets and a haunted look in his eyes. His wedding ring was gone. "She's back," he said, voice barely above a whisper. "She wants to talk." I stepped aside, motioned for him to come in. He didn't move. "She's saying you twisted everything. That you forged the will. That you're unstable. She's trying to make me believe that you're the problem." His voice broke a little. "And you're here because part of you believes her," I said quietly. He didn't answer. Just stared at the floor, ashamed. That's when I realized my son was still standing at the edge of a cliff. And Esme, even as her world burned, still knew how to whisper like a siren. "I tried to stay neutral, Mom," he murmured. "But I'm caught in the middle. I feel like I'm losing everything." I walked to the side table, pulled out a small envelope. One I had sealed years ago. One I prayed I'd never have to open. Inside was a photograph. A grainy image of a hospital bed. Me bruised, hooked to IVs. The date? March 4th, 2017. The night Esme pushed me down the stairs. "You were away on a work trip," I said, placing the photo in his hand. She told the paramedics I tripped. And I let her. Because I thought, maybe I was imagining it. Maybe I really did fall. But Grant, I pulled out the second item. A printed transcript of a 911 call. The dispatcher, "911, what's your emergency?" Esme's voice, "Old woman fell down the stairs." "Yeah, she's bleeding." "No, don't send lights. It'll scare the neighbors." Grant read it. Twice. His hands trembled. I filed it away and never said a word. Not to protect her. To protect you. He sank onto the porch bench like the wind had been knocked from his lungs. "She lied to me for years. She hurt you. And I didn't see any of it." "You didn't want to," I said. "Because if you had, you would have had to choose." Tears slipped down his face. He didn't wipe them. "She told me you were forgetful. That you accused her of things. That you got confused." I thought maybe you were declining." I looked at him, long and hard. "I may be old, Grant. But I've never been confused about what cruelty looks like." He covered his face. Sobbed quietly. "I married a monster," he whispered. "No," I said. "You believed one. There's a difference." I left him on the porch with that truth. I didn't hug him. I didn't forgive him. Not yet. Some wounds don't heal with apologies. They heal when loyalty is broken clean. That night, Esme tried texting him again. He never replied. And in the silence she had once used to punish me, she finally began to understand what real isolation feels like. Not being locked in a pantry, but being locked out of every life you once controlled. The flyer was everywhere. Tacked to cork boards at coffee shops, slid into mailboxes, even stuck to windshields in supermarket parking lots. An evening of healing. Esme Whitmore speaks out live. Free entry. Donations welcomed. Witness a woman rise from betrayal and reclaim her voice. The audacity of it all made Miriam spit her tea across the kitchen. She starved you and now she's the victim? Lord help us. But I didn't flinch. Because I had been expecting it. Esme wasn't the kind to slink off into obscurity. She was theatrical. Addicted to attention. And nothing fed her ego like a spotlight wrapped in pity. She had booked the town's old event hall, the one next to the library I helped fund 20 years ago, and planned to live stream her apology speech to thousands of online followers. "I'll come clean," she said in her preview post, about how grief can twist people. About how I thought I was helping my mother-in-law. Helping? I gritted my teeth and sent one text to Natalie, the journalist. Get your crew. Tonight. Hall entrance. Be ready. The room was packed by 7 p.m. Esme stood at the podium in flowing white linen, her makeup soft and angelic, hair tied like a martyr. I loved her, she began, voice trembling. I just didn't know how to help her. And when she turned on me, when she faked her own death, I was devastated. The crowd murmured. The camera panned. The livestream chat overflowed with emojis and divided opinions. But then, from the back of the room, the double doors creaked open. And I walked in. Not alone. Beside me, Natalie. Behind me, 2 former maids. A neighbor who once heard me screaming through the pantry door. And Grant. The room turned. Gasps rippled. Esme froze. Continue, I said, loud enough for the mic to catch it. Tell them how you helped me. Or would you like me to tell them what the pantry smelled like after 12 hours without food or light? Esme's face went ghost white. Her hands shook. You don't belong here, she hissed. This is my town, I said calmly. My life. My story. Natalie stepped forward, holding up a small black speaker. She pressed play. Esme's voice, clear as glass. If she dies in there, I'll just say I forgot. Honestly, I'm doing the world a favor. The silence that followed was absolute. A moment suspended in judgment. Then came the whispers. The phones lifted. The cameras zoomed in. People stood up. And Esme, desperate, grabbed the mic and screamed, "She's manipulating all of you." She locked herself in. This is a trap. But no one believed her. Because now they had seen the monster behind the mascara. And when Grant stepped up beside me, placing one hand on my shoulder, it was over. Esme tried to leave, but police were waiting outside. They didn't cuff her. Not yet. But they served her official notice: fraud, obstruction, elder abuse, pending court dates attached. She collapsed in the lobby, screaming as the cameras followed her. And I stood outside under the soft streetlight, feeling air on my skin like freedom. Like closure. For the first time, I wasn't the woman locked away. I was the one who walked in and ended it all with the truth. The courthouse was colder than I remembered. Not in temperature, in memory. In ghosts. In justice long delayed. I hadn't stepped into that building since Grant was a teenager, back when his father and I finalized the deed to our home. Back when life still felt fair, predictable. Now, I was here to testify about pantry locks and plates scraped clean of food I never got to eat. About bruises hidden behind shawls and screams muffled through drywall. Esme arrived flanked by 2 lawyers. Her outfit was modest, makeup minimal, hair pulled into a neat twist. Her eyes, though, those were wild. Cornered. Panicked behind a facade of grace. She glanced at me once. I did not blink. The judge was a woman older, stern, with spectacles she wore low on her nose and a reputation for being merciless toward elder abuse. The courtroom hushed as my name was called. Diana Whitmore. Please approach the stand. I moved slowly but deliberately. My cane tapped softly against the floor with every step, like punctuation marks to the years I had survived in silence. I was sworn in. And then it began. My lawyer, Denise, opened gently. Mrs. Whitmore, can you tell the court what happened on October 18, 2023? I inhaled. She locked me in the pantry. Said I was talking back. I asked where the salt was. That's all. She shoved me in, shut the door, and didn't return until midnight. And was that the only time? I laughed softly. Bitter. It was the first time she used the word punishment. But no, it wasn't the only time. Some days it was for an hour. Others? 12. Once I fainted. She left me there anyway. There were gasps from the gallery. But I didn't stop. She controlled the bathroom. My food. My medicine. My dignity. And your son. My heart clenched. He worked long hours. He didn't see. Or, he refused to see. That hurt more than the bruises. Denise placed a small speaker on the table. With the judge's permission, she pressed play. The recording filled the courtroom. She should have died in there. I was doing everyone a favor. Esme's voice. Cold. Unapologetic. Esme's lawyer jumped up. Objection. That's out of context, sustained, the judge said, but it was too late. The damage was done. The jury had heard. And they had seen my face not broken, but firm, as the words echoed through the room like a resurrection. Then came the cross-examination. Esme's lawyer tried to rattle me. "Mrs. Whitmore, you claim to have faked your own death. Isn't that deceptive?" "Yes," I said calmly. "It was survival. The kind women like me are forced to learn. You expect the court to believe you were locked in a pantry for hours, with no witnesses?" I looked him in the eye. "I don't expect the court to believe anything. I brought proof." And one by one, we unveiled the evidence. Time-stamped video footage, audio files, medical reports, testimony from the housekeeper who had also suffered under Esme. Grant himself, trembling as he confessed what he ignored for too long. Esme's expression shifted from smug to pale to vacant. She stopped scribbling notes. She just sat there, jaw clenched, eyes glassy. When her turn came to speak, she sobbed. Claimed trauma. Claimed stress. Claimed I exaggerated. But the courtroom no longer believed her voice. They believed mine. When I stepped down from the witness stand, I didn't stumble. I stood taller than I had in years. Because no one could lock me in a box again. Not physically. Not legally. Not ever. The jury took only 3 hours. 3 hours to weigh decades of silence, months of torment, and one pantry door that had become my tomb. I sat beside Denise, hands folded tightly in my lap. My cane rested against my thigh like a weapon I no longer needed. Behind me, Miriam squeezed my shoulder. Grant sat 2 rows back, silent, shaken, present. Esme avoided eye contact the entire time. Her lawyers whispered to her, trying to prepare her. But there was nothing left to prepare. The evidence had done its job. So had the truth. The courtroom stilled as the jury returned. The full woman, a stern woman with silver braids and no time for nonsense, stood with the paper in hand. In the case of Diana Whitmore versus Esme Whitmore, on the count of elder abuse, we find the defendant guilty. I closed my eyes. The word hung in the air like a church bell tolling at a funeral, but this time, it was not mine. On the count of attempted bodily harm, guilty. On the count of willful neglect, guilty. Each word landed like stone, stacking into a monument of justice I never thought I'd live to see. Then came sentencing. The judge adjusted her glasses, her expression unreadable. "Ms. Esme Whitmore, your crimes go beyond cruelty. They echo a terrifying trend of elder abuse masked in domestic care. You attempted to erase a woman, her history, and her voice. This court will not allow it." She paused, then delivered the blow. 6 years in state prison. No parole before 4. The silence snapped. Esme screamed. "You can't do this to me. I'm the victim." She manipulated everything. She faked her death. The bailiff moved toward her, but she twisted free, knocking over her chair. She was always jealous of me. She poisoned Grant against me. This isn't justice. This is revenge. I stood slowly. "No," I said, loud and clear. "This is what truth looks like when it finally stops whispering." Her eyes met mine, wild, furious, and I saw something that wasn't fear. It was defeat. Because even she knew, no one believed her anymore. She was dragged from the courtroom in cuffs. Her designer shoes clicking against tile like nails on a coffin. The room exhaled. Reporters outside flooded the steps, cameras blinking, microphones raised, but I walked past them all. Because this wasn't about headlines. It was about healing. I got into the car with Miriam and said nothing the entire ride. Until we pulled into the driveway of my house, my home, once again. Then I looked out the window and whispered, let her rot in silence, the same way she left me. The silence in my home felt unfamiliar. Not heavy or cruel like before, just quiet. Honest. The kind of silence you notice when trauma finally stops screaming. I'd spent days cleaning, room by room. Not just wiping away dust or fingerprints, but purging memories. Reclaiming. The yoga mats were gone. The pantry shelves scrubbed and filled with bright labeled preserves. I even framed a photo of my younger self smiling in a garden, just to remind myself I had once bloomed. But then, I reached the office. It used to be my son's study, a quiet corner filled with bills and books, until Esme took it over. She filled it with crystals, incense, and folders labeled Manifestation Coaching. I nearly tossed everything without looking. But something made me stop. A drawer. The bottom one. Stuck slightly. Jammed like it didn't want to open. I pulled harder. And it gave. Inside was a small black binder. No label. Just a sticky note on the front, half torn. It read, Plan B if the old woman talks. My heart clenched. I opened it slowly. Page after page, printed emails. Screenshots. Edited medical files. Photos of me, eyes closed, slouched on a chair, with captions beneath like, Diana Whitmore, showing signs of dementia. Unstable. Possibly delusional. Concerning mental health deterioration. And then it hit me, she was building a backup narrative. A full dossier designed to discredit me in case I ever spoke out. She had planned to say I was senile. Manipulate doctors. Claim I wandered, lied, imagined things. She had even saved fake texts forged under my name. One read, I'm sorry for being difficult. I forget things sometimes. She wanted to erase me in more ways than one. I gripped the edge of the desk until my knuckles turned white. There were even notes to Grant. Pre-written messages she never sent, titled If She Turns Him Against Me. In them, she twisted stories. Made herself the martyr. Painted me as abusive, jealous, unstable. And one final note, scrawled in pen at the back of the binder. If I can't silence her, I'll destroy her name. That's almost better. My stomach turned. Even prison hadn't ended her grip. She had left behind a time bomb. A shadow. A false legacy she hoped would bloom like mold in her absence. But I wasn't afraid. I called Natalie, the reporter, and sent her photos of every page. I want this binder documented, I said. Not to destroy her again, but to remind people these monsters don't always vanish when the cell door closes. Sometimes they linger. And we have to name them. Natalie agreed. This, she said, is the final nail. I didn't burn the binder. I placed it inside the pantry, right where she locked me. Because now I own that space and every ghost inside it. The invitation came in a gold-trimmed envelope. Thick paper, handwritten in soft ink. You are being honored for your strength, your courage, and your voice. Please join us for the Women of Resilience Gala, where your story will be recognized on a national stage. I stared at it for a long time. Miriam was thrilled, of course. She helped me pick out a soft gray dress. Even Grant offered to fly in and escort me. Mom, you deserve this, he said over the phone. You've done something incredible. But the truth? I didn't feel incredible. I felt tired. Because no one tells you what comes after survival. They cheer for your victory, but they don't see the shadows that follow you home. They don't see you lying awake, wondering how you could have loved someone who let this happen. Or why your voice came back only after your body had broken. Still, I went. The gala was held in a grand ballroom, golden chandeliers glowing above white linen tables. Women in sequins and heels greeted me with gentle smiles, some whispering, "Thank you for speaking up," others saying, "You're the reason I left my abuser." Cameras flashed. The crowd applauded as I stepped onto the stage. A host handed me the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen," she said, "this is Diana Whitmore. Survivor. Fighter. And voice for the voiceless." I took a breath. And began. "I don't feel like a hero," I said. "I felt like a ghost for years. I was seen but not heard. Fed but not nourished. Alive but not really living." The room fell silent. My daughter-in-law didn't just lock me in a pantry. She locked me out of my own life. Out of warmth. Out of dignity. And what hurt most was knowing my own son didn't see it until it was almost too late. I paused. Let it sink in. Everyone keeps calling me brave. But bravery isn't a single moment. It's choosing to live with the memories afterward. To rebuild your identity from the pieces someone else tried to erase. That's what I'm still doing. Every day. Somewhere in the front row, a woman wiped her eyes. I survived. Yes. But I also lost time. Years of laughter. Of peace. I'm grateful to be free, but I'm also grieving what I'll never get back. I stepped back from the mic. The applause wasn't thunderous. It was quiet. Respectful. Real. And that meant more than all the trophies in the world. That night, back home, I sat alone at the kitchen table. The one where I once ate in silence. The one Esme had tried to control. And I cried. Not because I was sad, but because I had finally said everything I once kept locked behind my lips, like that pantry door. And the world listened. It arrived in a plain envelope. No return address. No stamp. Just tucked inside my mailbox like a secret trying not to be discovered. I almost tossed it, thinking it was another legal notice or maybe a misguided fan letter. But something about the handwriting stopped me. It was shaky, uncertain, familiar. Inside was a single sheet of paper. And it began like this. My name is Alina. I don't expect you to know me, but I know you. My hands tightened as I kept reading. I worked for Esme. Briefly. Long before she married your son. Back when she was building her yoga studio out of a rented garage. She promised me work. Purpose. Healing. What I got was control. Isolation. Threats. I was 17. I felt the room tilt. She told me I was chosen. That I needed discipline. That I was too emotional. Too reactive. She used silence like a punishment. She made me kneel for hours if I questioned her. She called it energy realignment. I called it pain. I pressed my hand to my mouth. But I stayed silent. Because she said no one would believe a foster girl over a respected spiritual coach. She said she'd ruin me. And I believed her. The letter shook in my trembling hands now. Then one day, I saw your face on the news. Heard your voice. And for the first time in a decade, I didn't feel crazy. I didn't feel alone. You gave me courage. I've spoken to the prosecutor. I told them everything. They're reopening investigations into her yoga retreats, the ones she held off the books. You didn't just survive for yourself, Mrs. Whitmore. You survived for all of us. The final lines were written more carefully, as if she paused between each word. You were her prisoner once. But now, you're the key for so many others. I sat down, hard, and cried in a way I hadn't cried in months. Not for myself. Not for pain. But for every woman still waiting in some silent room, waiting for the lock to click open, for a voice to tell them they're not imagining it, they're not weak, they're not alone. This letter wasn't about the past. It was a doorway. And I had just realized. I wasn't done walking through them. The room was smaller than I imagined. Just 12 chairs arranged in a gentle circle, with paper cups of lukewarm tea and tissues placed discreetly on a folding table nearby. There were no cameras. No awards. No speeches. Just eyes. Soft, cautious, tired. Eyes like mine. The flyer had said Women Reclaimed, a weekly gathering of domestic abuse survivors, and I had held onto it for weeks, folding and unfolding it like a secret I wasn't sure I had permission to tell. But after Alina's letter, I knew I had to go. Not as a guest speaker. Not as a hero. Just as Diana. The room smelled faintly of lavender and something older, sorrow, maybe. A woman named Camilla welcomed me with a warm nod. You don't have to share tonight, she said. Just being here is enough. But I wanted to. When it was my turn, I stood slowly. My cane tapped once against the floor. My name is Diana, I said. Heads turned. Some widened in recognition. One woman even gasped softly. I was locked in a pantry by my daughter-in-law. Not once. Not twice. Repeatedly. She controlled my food. My movement. My silence. No one interrupted. No one pitied me. They just listened, the way only people who've been through hell know how to. I told them about the will. The cameras. The trial. The way Esme screamed as she was sentenced. But I also told them the quieter truths. I still eat too fast. Like the food might disappear. I still check doors twice at night. Sometimes I stand in a sunny room and still feel cold. One woman across from me, no older than 30, wiped her eyes. Then she whispered, I told my husband I was coming to the store. If he finds out I'm here, her voice broke. And I saw myself, not just in the bruises or the fear, but in the hesitation. The guilt that isn't ours, but clings anyway. After the meeting, she approached me. You're Diana Whitmore, she said. I watched your court hearing. I watched every second. I nodded gently. You don't need to be famous to survive. She smiled a little. But it helps knowing someone else already did. I placed a small card in her palm. Not with my phone number, with the number of a shelter. A lawyer. A lifeline. You'll survive too, I told her. And when you're ready, maybe you'll be someone else's reason to leave. That night, I didn't cry. I didn't feel broken. For the first time, I felt useful. Not because I was brave, but because I was willing to be honest. And sometimes, that's braver than anything else. The envelope was cream-colored again. Same elegant handwriting. Same unsettling stillness in its weight. I knew before I opened it. It was her. Esme. It had been 5 months since her sentencing. 5 months of silence. 5 months of breathing without the taste of fear in my mouth. And yet, just seeing her name in the corner of the return address made my hands tremble again like I was that woman on the pantry floor. I didn't want to open it, but I did, because I needed to know. The letters smelled faintly of perfume. The same scent she used to wear, that floral ice she sprayed over every bruise, every scream. Dear Diana, I suppose congratulations are in order. You won. You always wanted to be the victim, and now you're everyone's favorite martyr. Bravo. But I've had time to think, to reflect. And I want you to know, I don't regret what I did. I regret getting caught. I gripped the edge of the page. You were never as innocent as everyone thinks. You were manipulative, passive-aggressive. You played the fragile old woman card every time things didn't go your way. I was protecting my home, my marriage, my future. You got in the way. You always did. The words bled like poison. But don't get comfortable. The world loves a victim until they find a new one. So enjoy your spotlight while it lasts. People forget. They always do. It ended with a single, chilling line. I'm not finished with you. I never was. There was no apology, no remorse. Only venom disguised as reflection. I folded the letter slowly, carefully, as if it might burn me. I sat with it for a long time, not crying, not raging, just deciding. Because part of me wanted to reply, to tell her she failed, that I wasn't broken, that her voice no longer lived inside me. But another part of me, the part that had healed, knew better. Esme had already taken too much. She didn't deserve my voice anymore. So I didn't reply. I took the letter, walked to the backyard, and placed it inside a metal bowl I used for herbs. Then I lit a match and watched her words turn to ash. When the flames died, I whispered the only sentence she'd never understand. You don't live here anymore. Not in my pantry. Not in my mind. Not in me. The email came on a Wednesday afternoon. Subject line, Diana Whitmore, a national voice for survivors? The network was one of the biggest. A primetime special. Live audience. A segment titled Resilience, Women Who Refuse to Stay Silent. They offered hair, makeup, travel, and a platform seen by millions. Miriam squealed when she saw it. This is it, Dee. This is your moment. People need to see you. Even Grant, over the phone, said, You've earned this, Mom. You're already a symbol. You might as well own it. And part of me agreed. But the other part. It still flinched at the sound of pantry doors creaking open. It still checked locks twice at night. Still caught my breath every time someone stood too close in silence. The spotlight didn't scare me. The weight of it did. That night, I sat at the kitchen table, the very one Esme once scrubbed obsessively, and stared at the flickering candle in front of me. What was my story now? Was I just the woman locked in a pantry? Was I becoming a symbol of pain instead of a person who lived through it? I walked to the mirror, looked at my reflection. Not broken, not glowing, just me. A woman who had once begged for a glass of water through a crack in a wooden door, now being asked to speak into a microphone watched by millions. I said the words softly to myself, You can do this. But you don't have to. That was the difference now. Choice. Control. Freedom. The next morning, I called the producer. I'm honored, I said. But I'll do the interview only if it's on my terms. No drama. No recreations. No glamour shots of crying old women. If we tell this story, we tell all of it. The quiet moments. The ugly ones. The after. She paused, then said, That's exactly what we want, Mrs. Whitmore. So I agreed. Not to be a symbol, but to be a mirror. For every woman still sitting in silence, wondering if anyone would believe her. I wouldn't give them inspiration wrapped in a bow. I would give them the truth. And maybe that was enough. The studio lights were warmer than I expected. Not harsh. Almost like a soft afternoon sun. The producer had kept her promise, no dramatizations, no exploitation. Just a quiet set, a curved couch, a table with 2 glasses of water. Behind me, a live audience sat in still silence, their faces lit with empathy and expectation. The host, kind, steady-voiced, and full of grace, smiled at me gently. "Mrs. Whitmore," she said, "the world has heard about what happened in that pantry. But today, we want to hear about what happened after. Who are you now?" I took a slow breath. I'm a woman who survived starvation, but also something deeper. Silence. Dismissal. I lived in a house where I was treated like furniture, visible, but never heard. The audience was still. But survival isn't just about crawling out of a locked room. It's learning how to stay in the world after. How to love again. How to trust. Slowly, painfully, honestly. I spoke about Miriam. About Grant. About Alina's letter and the women in the support circle. I shared the truth about how justice felt like a victory, but healing felt like a war I was still fighting. The host reached across, touched my hand. "Thank you," she said. "You are more than what happened to you. You are the woman who turned a pantry into a platform." Then she turned to the audience. "If anyone here has something they'd like to say to Diana, now's your moment." A few stood to clap. And then, one young woman rose. She looked maybe 25. Slender frame. Nervous hands. "My name is Emily," she said, voice cracking. "I came here today because of you." I tilted my head slightly. Something about her felt familiar. My mother worked for Esme years ago. She used to come home crying. One day, she just stopped talking altogether. I never knew why. Until I saw your story. The host stepped aside. The cameras stayed fixed. Emily continued. "She passed away last year. But before she did, she gave me a journal. In it, she wrote your name. She said, if Diana ever speaks, believe her. And stand up for her." My breath caught. "She knew what was happening," Emily said, tears streaming now. "But she didn't have your strength. She didn't survive it." The room was silent, broken only by sniffles and a few gasps. I stood slowly and walked to her. We embraced in the middle of that studio like 2 broken timelines stitching themselves together. "I'm sorry," I whispered. "No," she said. "You gave her peace. You gave me closure." The cameras zoomed in. Not on pain, not on shock, but on healing. 2 strangers. One truth. One voice that refused to stay buried. Before we move to the final chapter, if this story touched you, if you've ever felt trapped, unheard, or erased, please let us know where you're listening from. Comment below, share this with someone who needs to hear it, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us keep telling the stories that others are too afraid to say out loud. The house was quiet. Not empty. Just content. Miriam had moved into the guest room 2 weeks ago after insisting I shouldn't live alone anymore. Grant visited every Sunday, no longer out of guilt, but love. We didn't talk about Esme anymore. Not because we were avoiding it, but because we didn't need to. She no longer lived in this home. Only I did. And yet, there was one thing I hadn't done. One room I hadn't returned to. One door I had passed every day, sometimes brushing my fingertips across its frame, sometimes avoiding it altogether. The pantry. That morning, I brewed tea. My hands were steady. My breath unshaken. And I walked into the kitchen. I opened the pantry door slowly. No trembling. No dread. Just silence. It smelled like rosemary and rice now. Not mildew. Not fear. Just food and warmth. I stepped inside. I touched the shelf where I once laid my head. The corner where I sat for hours, knees drawn in. The spot where I once whispered my own name just to remember I still existed. Then I reached into my pocket and pulled out a folded note. I placed it gently on the shelf. It read, "To the next woman who thinks she is too small to fight back, you are not. Your silence is not weakness. Your suffering is not invisible. And when the time comes, your voice will shake the walls. You will survive. And then you will rise. Diana, I didn't close the door behind me. I left it open. Wide. Letting light spill inside. Because darkness only wins when the door is shut. I turned back to the kitchen, tea still warm, and smiled to myself. Not because it was over, but because it was mine now. Thank you for listening to The Pantry Became My Prison. If this story moved you, please like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Where are you listening from? Let us know in the comments. Your voice matters. And if you or someone you love has experienced something similar, remember, you are not alone. You are not weak. And one day, your silence can become someone else's strength. We'll see you in the next story.